Oh, Jordan Peterson is in the news again, most likely saying something extremely delightful and intellectual. Let's have a look.
A warning to citizens of Ontario and Canada. Bill 67, which purports to be nothing but an anti racist bill, is in fact the most pernicious and dangerous piece of legislation that any Canadian government has attempted to put forward.
Well, now I shouldn't have to explain how this take is objectively false and remarkably stupid. There's literally legislation that forbid First Nations peoples and communities from expressing their identities through governance and culture. All right, let's see what else he has to say about it.
It will make mandatory the subversion of the entire education system in Ontario, K-12 as well as colleges and universities, to the radically leftist doctrines known as critical theory, a thoroughly anti-Western ideology, both postmodern and Marxist in its derivation, based on the idea that all our extant institutions are racist, sexist, and discriminatory.
All right, let's first kind of figure out what critical theory is. A critical theory is any approach to social philosophy that focuses on reflective assessment and critique of society and culture in order to reveal and challenge power structures. With roots in sociology and literary criticism, it argues that social problems stem more from social structures and cultural assumptions than from individuals. It argues that ideology is the principal obstacle of human liberation. So basically what critical theory is it's assessing how our society works and challenging things that make it suck. Basically states that social problems stem from cultural assumptions, which would be kind of like racism, and social structures, which would be like institutionalized racism, things like that. Things that basically cause groups of people to be treated differently than other groups of people. So if you haven't noticed, critical theory isn't anything Jordan Peterson says it is. What JP is doing is trying to demonize a very reasonable principle because it doesn't align with his worldview. Now, this isn't only dishonest, but it's destructive. This take would be okay if it was like Joe Blow in the streets giving his opinion, but this is an accredited doctor with an insanely large following, like a very vast following. It took minutes of online research to figure out what the bill actually is, and this means that JP's either being willfully ignorant or he's a liar.
Critical theorists assume that history is best understood as the war between identity groups, with one group always oppressing and all other groups always victimized and exploited. Critical theorists dismiss the idea of the sovereign, free individual, claiming that belief in such sovereignty and freedom does nothing but justify the oppression and exploitation of the marginalized.
So what this like word vomit is absolutely nothing and a lie. Like just to begin with, it's just a straight flat out lie.
Critical theorists reject the presumption of individual innocence, absent proof of wrongdoing.
That's objectively a stupid take. He's essentially trying to push this narrative that this ideology is trying to remove individual responsibility from everything and make it more so about like identity politics in groups of people, when there's not a single aspect of this ideology that I've read in my life that represents that.
Assuming that membership in a group regarded as dominant and exploitative is sufficient to indicate the moral culpability of any given member of that group.
That's also an objectively incorrect, false. That's just a bold-faced lie. So what he's trying to say here is that the methodology is trying to teach people that belonging to a population means you're responsible for everything that population has done and does. Which, I mean, there's no evidence of this anywhere being a part of that those teachings or that theory even.
Critical theorists define offense and harm as subjectively determined. Anyone who feels victimized by any statement made by anyone for any reason is fully justified in their feeling and claim of harm, regardless of the intent of the author of the statement, who is then to be deemed guilty of such victimization and denied even the opportunity for a reasonable defense.
What he's trying to do is make a case for not being allowed to say what you want or having compelled speech. But you can say anything you want unscrutinized unless it's hate speech, which lucky for us has an objective meaning, and it's not subjective like he's blatantly lying about. He goes on to say that anyone accused of something, of harming someone, for saying anything with any intention, which is batshit crazy, is automatically guilty. I mean, people can get hurt feelings, I get that, but claiming anyone can claim harm for anything is just really stupid. And then to say the person making the statement is automatically determined as being guilty of any harm with no defense. And I mean, if you have any experience inside of reality, That's a crazy thing to say. This video is like a lie built onto a lie, built onto a lie, built onto a lie.
Bill 67 will mandate the creation of institutions of inquisition in every educational institution, to which anyone who has an opinion or undertakes an action that is perceived to violate the tenets of critical theory will be made necessarily subject to punishment.
A creation of institutions of inquisition in every educational institution, as if our educational system should not be scrutinized. It's kind of a dumb statement to say that as if it's a negative thing. Then he goes on to say that if you have opinions or actions that go against the tenets of critical theory, you'll be subject to punishment. What he's saying is he does not think there should be a penalty for being racist. I mean, if you do think racism isn't reprehensible, this video is not for you. I mean, maybe go check out like Steven Crowder or something.
The author of this bill, MPP Laura May Lindo, NDP, Kitchener Centre, is former head of equity at Laurier University. It was Laura May Lindo who developed the policies that resulted in the circumstances that enveloped Lindsay Shepherd in 2017, which produced a scandal provincially, nationally, and internationally, left a permanent stain on Canadian universities, on the reputation of Canadian universities, and demolished that young woman's academic ambitions and future.
Okay, first off, he's trying to drag someone through the mud that literally had no involvement with the scandal at Wilfrid Laurier University. And I use the word lightly because the situation is kind of ridiculous, and stating that this woman's policies written caused this scandal is even more absurd. I mean, you can read on the situation yourself, and I will provide a link.
The fact that the Ontario Conservative government has allowed and even encouraged such legislation to be put forward under their aegis, and then ignorant and careless enough to vote in support of it, is a woeful indication of both the perniciousness and deviance of the ideas that the legislation contains, and evidence of their own, the Conservatives' own stunning and continued inability to see the danger such doctrines present.
Ignorant and careless enough to vote in support of this deviant policy. Well, let's review the policy. I'll provide a link as well. So, Professional Development Program, Anti-Racism. Establish and provide annual professional development programs to educate teachers and other staff of the board about promoting racial equity and developing the necessary tools to address racism. Provide programs, intervention, or other supports for students, teachers, and staff who have been targeted by racism, witness incidents of racism, or engaged in racist behaviors, and the programs. Interventions and other supports may be provided by social workers, psychologists, or other professionals who have training in similar fields as determined by the board. Establish a protocol for recognizing, acknowledging, tracking, measuring, investigating, and responding to incidents of racism reported by students, teachers, staff, parents, or school community. As you can tell from reading the actual bill, it's not a deviant or nefarious bill whatsoever. It's extraordinarily reasonable, but it's presented in such a negative manner by JP that's intellectually dishonest, deceptive, and sad, to be honest with you.
It is much harder to actually deal with the fact of the sometimes unjust distribution of privileges and resources in a complex society than to kowtow to radicals who know how to viciously accuse, weaponize guilt, and claim through manipulative sloganeering the moral upper hand. But there's no excuse for the conservatives and for the classical liberals who also believe in the sovereignty of the individual to trumpet their compassion for the oppressed by allowing authoritarian ideologues to gain their treacherous way. This bill, 67, threatens the integrity of all the systems that will educate all the young people in Ontario for decades to come. If it passes, the rest of the provinces in Canada will follow suit. The fact that this bill is already through second reading is inexcusable. Wake up, Canadians, before you do yourself and your children irreparable harm.
Okay, so we already went over this bill. You guys saw for yourself, there's nothing devious or even threatening about this. So the entire section is essentially him name-calling the people, trying to put this policy through, and it's really bad luck on Jordan. I'm not saying he's directly racist by having this position, but when his position is directly contrary to affirmative action initiated to combat racism, it's just not a good look for anyone. Thank you guys for checking out my video. It's really appreciated. This is my first time ever doing something like this, and I learned a lot from it. This style of content is much harder to make than I thought, and as well, I'm not very good at making it. Thank you so much. I'm going to make a commitment to get better at this, and if it's something that people enjoy, then I'm happy to make more of it. Thanks again, and take care.